The news of my friend's death was not as shocking to me as how they found his body. He had been missing for 2 weeks, and we hadn't heard from him. We started to worry, so we went to the police. They searched for him for days, but they were unable to find him. Then, one day, we received a call from the police. They had found his body in the forest. His body was incredibly mutilated. His eyes were gouged out, his tongue was cut off, and his organs were torn out. We were unable to identify him. His face was unrecognizable. It was horrible. We didn't know who did it. There were no witnesses and no evidence. It was a cold case. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I knew what happened. I knew that my friend had been killed by something demonic. On the night he disappeared, I was walking with him on the edge of the forest when he decided to go into the forest. I refused because I felt a sense of fear. I tried to stop him, but he was strangely determined. I told him that I would not go into the forest, and I walked in the other direction. But when I looked at him as he walked into the heart of the forest, I noticed the shadow of a strange person chasing him. I was not sure if it was real or just my imagination. I ignored it, and a few days later the news of his disappearance spread. I could not confess what happened because I was afraid of being blamed, but now I know who is to blame for all this. It is me who allowed this to happen. I hope to stop blaming myself, but it does not seem like it will ever happen. I was sitting in the living room with my family, playing a fun game, when we heard a scream. We all stopped and looked at each other, then at the door. The sound was coming from outside, from the forest that was just a few meters from our house. "What was that?" my mother asked. "I don't know," my father said. "But it sounds like it's coming from the forest." I looked at my brother and sister, and I saw the fear in their eyes. We weren't alone in our fear. We all stood up and went to the door. We opened it slowly and looked outside. The night was dark, and there was nothing we could see. But we could still hear the screams. "We need to go see what's happening," my father said. We all agreed and went to the forest. It was cold and damp, and the sound of the screams was getting louder. We walked for a few minutes, then we saw something in the darkness. It was a person. They were lying on the ground and trying to run away. "Stop!" my father shouted. The person stopped moving and looked at us. They were pale and their hair was standing on end. "Who are you?" my father asked. The person didn't reply. "What happened to you?" my mother asked. "There's something in the forest," the person said. "Something evil." We looked at each other, then back at the forest. The air was still again, and there was no sound of screaming. "There's nothing here," my father said. "Yes, there is," the person said. They saw it. They pointed at my brother. I looked at my brother, and I saw that his eyes were wide with fear. "What did you see?" I asked. My brother didn't reply. "Tell me," I shouted. My brother raised his head and looked at me. "I saw a demon," he said. My eyes widened with fear. I didn't know what to believe. "There's no such thing as a demon," my father said. "There is," my brother said. "I saw it." We didn't know what to do. We were scared, and we didn't know if we should believe my brother or not. "We need to go home," my father said. We all agreed and went home. We looked back at the forest when we left, but there was nothing we could see. We didn't talk about what happened in the forest. We didn't want to think about it. But we couldn't forget the screams or the look of fear in my brother's eyes. We know that there's something in the forest. Something evil. Something we don't want to see again. I was going camping with my friend in the woods. The weather was warm and sunny that day, and we were excited to spend some time outdoors. We set up our tent, gathered firewood, and started a barbecue. After dinner, we sat around the fire, told stories, and laughed. When the sun started to set, we started to feel sleepy. We set up our tent for sleeping and went inside. My friend fell asleep immediately, but I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the woods and the monsters that might be hiding in the darkness. After a while, I woke up to the sound of noise outside. I opened my eyes and looked outside. I saw a person standing in front of the tent. He was a shadow, and I couldn't see his face. He was not moving, but I could hear him whispering. I didn't know what he was saying or to whom he was speaking. After a while, he did something strange. He started to pour something on the tent. I didn't know what he was doing, and suddenly he disappeared. I stayed awake for a while, unable to move. I didn't know if he would come back or not. But after a while, I got the courage to go out of the tent. The sun had started to rise, and I wanted to know what he had poured on the tent. To my surprise, it was blood. I didn't know whose blood it was, or from what. I was horrified. I woke up my friend, and we left the camp in the woods altogether. We never went back.